Greetings and salutations, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. This is your host, the Barkeep, bringing you podcast 38 here at the Tavern, presented by HeroTaku.com. And once again, everybody, I am joined by my illustrious co-host, and I need to find new adjectives for you.
Just get thesaurus or start dipping into other languages.
Well, I think for now, how about the uncanny Raptor?
Yeah, that works.
And Raptors...
Can I be the Incredible next week?
Okay, we'll make you the Incredible Raptor next week. So Raptor's back from his Thanksgiving binge, just as I am. And today, we're going to go ahead and talk about basically Power Rangers' popularity throughout the first 6 seasons. And Raptor, here's basically what I'm talking about. For the most part, Power Rangers in Space was pretty much going to be the last Power Rangers season ever.
Yes.
But since it did so well, we continued on, got the post-Zordon era, as most people will go ahead and call it. But, you know, it leads to the idea that there were going to be six original seasons, basically, all part of a continuing storyline. And then that storyline developed and changed based on the popularity of the series.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, we're going to go ahead and talk about said popularity and try to analyze why certain choices were made in the name of popularity.
All right.
So here's what we're going to go ahead and do. I'm going to map out the entire series, and then we're going to go ahead and comment on a few things. Because, of course, we got Power Rangers as it started, which was a mega hit that nobody saw coming. So much that they did the Zoo 2 footage, Toei did extra footage for them.
Yeah, to extend Season 1.
Exactly. Which was 60 episodes, which I cannot think of another TV show that had 60 episodes within its first season. Heck, Ninja Turtles had 5 episodes in its first season.
I don't know. Transformers had upwards of 50 to 60 episodes in its first season, so...
Yeah.
As for a live-action show, incredibly unprecedented.
Absolutely. Now, the second season came about and had the Thunder Zords in there. Now, this is where we kind of get into the popularity aspect that I wanted to go ahead and talk about. Because the biggest question that I've always had, and everybody else has, is why did they not change their costumes? Why did they sub the Zoo Ranger costumes but the Die Ranger Zords? Mm-hmm. Now, the commonly accepted reasoning for that is because they were such a brand with the iconic diamonds and the helmets and the coins and all that, that to change them might have affected their popularity, and people wouldn't have liked it. Now, we know the story reasons, and I'm not going to talk about the story reasons. I want to talk about the real-world applications this has. Do you feel that Power Rangers would have suffered had they used the Die Ranger costumes, and do you think by not using the Die Ranger costumes that it was able to prolong their popularity into the second season?
I think that coming off of such a mega hit that the first season was, I think that to switch those suits from all these children who had come to like these characters in these very iconic costumes, there would have been backlash.
And I could almost see that as a kid.
And sorry, didn't mean to cut you.
That's okay.
The suits are more iconic to the show than the Zords are. The Zords are, of course, a very integral part of the show. Mm-hmm. They're the second thing that people remember when they think about Power Rangers. But the first are the suits.
Yes, and I will go ahead and grant that they made a good story reason for the change. And again, it's just what we're thinking about is how would that have declined in the popularity? Because let's be honest, Power Rangers got just as popular, if not more, by the second season because they had the new Zords. And of course, it was at that time they decided to go into the movie, which also they kept the Zoo Ranger suits. They didn't change those at all. And going into the third season, they didn't change those. Now, the reason we came up with this popularity question, because it was actually posed by my wife about the shifting popularity throughout the series. So another aspect that they changed that may have affected the popularity was removing Jason, Trini, and Zach. Do you think that made the show more popular or less popular?
You know, I do not think that it affected everything as much. I don't think it majorly affected it. I don't think their departure affected popularity as much as the new Zords did. Because if you think about it from the perspective of kids with short attention spans, it may be a different person beneath the suits of the black, yellow, and red Rangers. But it's still the same suits. They're still calling the same Zords that they called before.
And you know, the thing is I remember when I had first seen it, I was like, who the heck are these guys? Where's Jason and Trini and Zach going? I was really upset by it, but it didn't waver in my popularity of the series. Because it was one of those things like things are changing, and it was really rapidly changing at that point, too, because you were such in a status quo for a while. It is actually hard to even say there was a status quo in Power Rangers for a while.
Shake up, you get these characters leaving, you get Tommy leaving.
Yeah, and Tommy left first, and then came back, and then they all left, and we got new characters and all that.
And then Tommy's wrestling with having his powers and not having them.
Yeah, and then when the third season comes along, we get even more of a stretch with the Ninja Zords and the Shogun Zords, and then we get the Alien Rangers in there. And you could really tell by that point that they were really stretching the Zoo Ranger suits.
Resources, basically. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, that went into the change where they said ultimately we're going to change into Zeo. And now I've heard conflicting information on this, but basically a lot of people left around Zeo, and the ratings did start to go down slightly during Zeo. Now, whether that's true or not, we're going to have to...
I've heard it different. Okay. I heard that they were starting to decline during Season 3 of Mighty Morphin, but they picked up with Zeo.
See, that's why I said it's conflicted, because I've heard both stories, but from what I'm hearing about when we get into Turbo and Space, we'll talk about that, it seems like since the movie, there was kind of a downcline. That's what I've always kind of felt, is that since the movie, because a lot of my friends, that was the weird thing, is like, when I grew up in the phenomenon, I was there when it happened, and by the time Zeo came around...
You were there, and I was one.
Yes. So when Zeo came around, a lot of my friends had stopped watching the show. And that's a 4-year period, and of course kids are fickle, but you know how I am, I'm just stubborn. Not many of my friends were watching Zeo anymore. And actually, it was about that time as well, that's when Beetleborgs came out, the first season of Big Bad Beetleborgs, and my brother, who was a diehard just like me, switched and became more interested. Yeah, he got into the Beetleborgs more than he got into the Power Rangers, which I don't know if that had anything to go ahead and do with it. But do you think that changing to Zeo... I mean, ultimately, I think we would have to say it had a positive effect on the series. But as far as the popularity, the brand recognition to the common everyday person to be in the zeitgeist, in the popular culture, what kind of effect do you think that had on it?
Well, if we want to look at that, as for brand recognition, I think it probably had a negative effect. A negative effect that the series has yet to shake to this day.
I'm going to agree with you to an extent on that, again, because I'm stubborn. I mean, okay, being in the moment, the big thing was the command center is gone, and then you got the It's Coming thing, and I remember going into Toys R Us with my grandmother and my brother, and seeing the Zeo Megazord, and at the bottom of there, it had the picture of the new Rangers with the star, the square, and all that kind of stuff, and I just freaked out as a kid. I was like, wow, look at this. This is so awesome. What's the Zeo Crystal? Oh, that's what that means. You know, I mean, I was just going off and stuff. And of course, my grandmother bought it for me and the Red Bowzord, and you know, well,
how cute.
As you do. But I know on me it didn't affect, but again, I said I was stubborn. But, you know, just going into that, I mean, do you really think that changing costume negatively affects the series? Because it should be about the story. I'm going to concede that a lot of times it's not, for marketing reasons.
You're growing up.
Well, reluctantly, I'm accepting that. But the point the thing I'm trying to go ahead and ask is, does that really make that big a difference in how popular the show is as far as engaging stories and you know, kids being interested in still watching them?
Okay, so I see this from two perspectives. It would be negative. It would be negative for the casual viewers. The casual viewers are the people who pop in from time to time, and they either want to see things the way they remembered them, or if it's not the same, they'll think, oh, I don't like this anymore. I'm not going to watch it. You know, I deal with that in the friggin' Pokemon fandom all the goddamn time.
Okay.
But that's a different discussion. So, however, for the core audience, the kids who are tuning in each week, it would be popular with them because if you're watching it regularly, you were probably starting to get a little bit bored with the Zeo suits after 3 years.
It wasn't so much I was getting bored, I was confused.
You're confused that these dinosaur-themed heroes were piloting around.
And especially in the third, I mean, again, the explanation for the second scene makes sense. The Zords are destroyed or disabled, and they had to rebuild them in this new form. I get that. That makes perfect sense. But when they get ninja powers, and the suits are exactly the same, then that's where I have a problem.
Exactly. Their ninja powers are based on animals, and yet they still have their dinosaur helmets.
Yes. And that was the biggest thing for me, is it just didn't make any sense. And then when Zeo came along, and
it was back to a unified theme.
It started to make a little bit of sense again. It wasn't, the way I look at it now is what was cluttered with continuity, which is odd to say for a show that was on for 3 years, because you had all this kind of visual baggage, if I want to coin that term.
That is perfect way to put it.
And you know, the thing that most people forget about the original Mighty Morphin series is it was so branded not only on the costumes, but on the Rangers themselves. There used to be, I used to have a trading card game, or not, no, deck of cards, that had the teens in there animated. And then you had the flip head morphers, and then the songs of, I think it was Combat said, "Go, Jason, go, Trini." It was so much about those 5 guys. And then they after the first season, they really got away from that. And I wonder if that plays into the popularity decline as well, getting away from the characters, you know. But again, it seems to me a lot of it is visual, seeing the Zords, seeing these particular costumes. Because, you know, we get nostalgic. We get more nostalgic when we see the Tyranno Ranger costume than we do when we see the
Zeo 1.
Yeah, the O-Ranger costumes.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's kind of table this for a second, and we're going to transition into Turbo, which is the biggest drop in popularity, and we'll talk about that in Part 2. So, we'll see you guys in Part 2. And we are now back with Part 2 with Raptor and our discussion about the wavering popularity of Power Rangers throughout the first 6 years of the series.
All right.
And, you know, we talked a lot about primarily, you know, how they changed and tried to stretch the Zeo Ranger footage, and they went to Zeo. Now, I would say the biggest crime was going into Turbo.
Yes.
Now, we all know, and we talked about this in the first video, it's debatable about, you know, what the ratings were in Zeo. Because you've heard this, I've heard that, and unless I see actual figures, I'm not going to claim one or the other. So just clarification on that. But we can both agree that they definitely dipped in Zeo. And there were a number of reasons for that. One, you have a change in costume in less than a year. You have a movie coming out, which we have gone to great lengths, really had nothing to do with Power Rangers as far as the established continuity. You have the introduction of a Ranger that nobody asked for, but got anyway. And then halfway through the season, you get rid of arguably the most popular character of the series, and then 3 characters that we still liked. Not to mention, Zord and Alpha, they completely changed it. So, again, and they got rid of Ernie, for crying out loud. The only people that were still there were Bulk, Skull, and Lieutenant Stone. You know? Yeah. So...
You said 2.
Well, I just thought of Lieutenant Stone, so I had to bring that back up. Unless you want to count Bulk and Skull as a single entity. But, whatever. In any case... You know, what do you think about the change in Turbo? Why do you think it negatively affected popularity? Is it really for the reasons I said, or is it really maybe the change was just too quick?
I think the change was too quick because for a viewer at home, it probably felt like having the rug pulled out from under them.
That you're just starting to get comfortable again, and then suddenly, bam.
Yes.
And you know, I will say this, pre-internet was so great. In the fact that rumors were still rumors, and actual previews were amazing. Because I remember going to a convenience store with my father one time, and I saw a magazine. I don't know what the magazine was, but on the cover, like in the corner, were the Turbo Rangers.
Okay, cool.
And it said Power Rangers Turbo. I was like, what the heck is this? And then my dad got me for reading the magazine in the convenience store, and so I didn't know what was going on.
Why was he mad that you were reading a magazine in the convenience store?
This is not the library, Mr. Simpson.
Oh, I thought you said your dad was mad at you.
Yeah, he was. He's like, don't read that.
Oh.
It's like, a convenience store, we're not going to buy it. I don't know. Whatever, but that's my point, okay? And at the time, I thought it was just like an upgrade from the Zeo powers. Because it was the same color scheme. And from the brief image I got, it looked to me like it was just chrome added to it, like it was a power-up or something.
Yeah.
And I thought they were going to go the same way they did with the previous seasons. Like, oh, this is a new power-up that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But no, completely different. And I admit, when I came from the movie, I was excited. But then when it sank in, I'm like, oh, you know. But let's get back to the popularity thing right here. I mean, why do you think it? I mean, what do you really attribute to the change, or how much did Justin play into that?
I don't think Justin did it by himself.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that people definitely complain about, but I don't think he killed the ratings any more than Wesley killed the Next Generation's ratings.
Although I wouldn't put those two on the same levels. I mean, if Wesley Crusher was a Power Ranger, I would enjoy that a lot more.
They're superficially very similar, if you think about it, though.
Yeah, I know the point.
Annoying kid character added into a show that...
But, you know, I never felt Wesley was annoying. That was the weird thing. I never thought Wesley was annoying.
Probably because you were younger compared to the older Star
I was 13 when I started watching Star Trek, and
right.
You were like 23 when you started, right?
Yeah.
So there is a significant difference there. But, okay, let's kind of get back on track, because I love losing track of things.
The point I was making is that I don't think Wesley was driving the ratings down. I think it was...
You mean Justin?
Yeah. Wow. All these kid tag-alongs.
Yes.
They blur together.
But the point is that he didn't bring it down. It was so much change in such a little time.
Yeah, so much changing and decline in quality of the show.
Yes, because, again, they were blending those comedy elements. And a lot of times I was watching it, and I was just kind of like, this is not the normal things Power Rangers would do. Because at that time, Power Rangers was really leaning towards a space opera thing that we eventually got in Power Rangers in Space. Let me kind of explain that. Because we started getting more times where they would leave Earth, they would go to other planets, they would have, like, they have to go get the Sword of Light. There was... Gaskets, Where in the World is Zeo Ranger, Red, and King for a Day, where they would go meet different alien species, and the Alien Rangers were established in the third season.
And they came back during Zeo, and...
Yeah, they started all this world hopping and doing all these
and the fact that they were being invaded by an alien empire instead of just a... single entity who keeps sending out monsters.
If there's one thing you can say about Power Rangers in at least the first 4 seasons, is they kept escalating the threat. It went from Rita to Zed and Rita to the Machine Empire.
And then you get a dip.
Exactly. And that's where the show became domesticated. In the sense, okay, let me give a good example here.
Try to domesticate you.
Maybe that's the wrong word, but look at it this way. Look at Batman the Animated Series, okay? That's a pretty grounded show, really keeps the fantasy elements out for the most part, and is a very plausible thing that can go ahead and happen. When that character moves into his Justice League incarnation, and then Justice League Unlimited, it becomes so much bigger than what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason they probably didn't do another Batman series based on Kevin Conroy's Batman, Bruce Timm's Batman, basically, is it wouldn't fit.
How could you go back?
Exactly. Even Batman Beyond is kind of sketchy at times when you think about it. I know Batman Beyond came out before the Justice League, but you know when you just came back from Apocalypse and punched Darkseid in the face, it's really hard to take the Penguin seriously.
Exactly.
And that's what the feeling I got for Power Rangers is that they did all this great epic stuff.
They take down that, the combined forces of the Power Rangers and Zed and Rita destroy this powerful alien empire.
And I can't think of a time in Power Rangers Turbo where they left the planet and did anything.
And then you get a hussy in a submarine.
I mean, Diva Dogs could be an okay villain, but they lost scope of it. That was the problem because, again, everything, it became smaller. The show became smaller again. And that's what really bothered me, is that, because again, with Zeo, one of my favorite episodes in Zeo is Rangers of Two Worlds. Because they're going back from Aquitar to Earth. They're battling two different alien forces and all that. I mean, there was so much going on. It was more than just Angel Grove that was at stake.
Yes.
And that's what we got with Power Rangers in Space. But in Power Rangers Turbo, it was only Angel Grove that was at stake. That was the problem.
Yeah, and the strange thing is following that, it got right back to that escalation.
And we'll get to that escalation. But I would say what declined for Power Rangers Turbo was not so much the character changes or necessarily the costume changes. I really think it was a change in scope. That they took what was becoming an expansive universe. Because look at Power Rangers. When Power Rangers first started, you had this great mythos and a backstory. Mm-hmm. Then you started moving forward, going to other places, doing everything, seeing what the universe is up to instead of our little pond, basically.
Yeah.
And then after all that, let's go back home and deal with just our problems.
Well, just look at the Zeo suits versus the Turbo suits.
Yeah.
Because, all right, so the Zeo suits have the circuitry, but it almost looks like a breastplate.
Yeah.
Looks like armor. Looks upgraded. And then you go to the Turbo suits, which look even less regal than the Mighty Morphin suits did.
I mean, I like the chrome on there. I always thought the chrome was cool, and I did think it was an interesting...
The helmets are a cool upgrade.
Except for the blue helmet, because I can't take the blue helmet seriously anymore.
But the rest of the costume... Mm-hmm. Leaves a lot to be desired.
Absolutely. Too much pipping, I think, was the main issue on that.
And it looked like another visual downgrade.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that's all we can talk about Turbo for the moment. So everybody, join us in part 3 where we conclude this with Power Rangers in Space. And welcome to part 3, the final chapter of our little video about the popularity of Power Rangers. And basically we're going to talk about Power Rangers in Space. And as we had said before, ratings declined in Turbo, came up during Power Rangers in Space, and renewed the show for where it is now, basically. So the question I have to you, Raptor, is why do you think Power Rangers in Space did so well? It never reached the same heights as Mighty Morphin. Let's be clear about that. It was no longer a worldwide phenomenon. It started to become this, I wouldn't even say cult, but more of an underground thing. Because, again, it wasn't in pop culture as much. A lot of other shows were starting to take over. And, of course, this was the era of boy bands and Britney Spears, and that was more of what people were getting into at that time.
Yes, but we will say, yes, there was a rating spike because it saved the show from cancellation.
Yes, I just want to know what that is because, I mean, I can sit here and say they had great stories. And they were very creative in that season for what they have. I would say that Power Rangers in Space and Power Rangers Lost Galaxy are the two most creative shows in what they did with the original footage and how good they were able to make the shows in the end.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there.
Yeah. So that being said, was it the creativity and the storyline? Was it the characters? Because we got all new cast, basically. I mean, got rid of Justin. We barely got to know the other Turbo teens by this point. They were only in maybe 20 episodes or less at the time that Turbo ended. So we had all new characters, a brand new situation. Everything was new. There were really no links to the past, with the exception of going to Angel Grove High School in the first half and Alpha 6, which is not even really Alpha 6 anymore with the change. So what would account for the popularity if it was nothing like Mighty Morphin?
Okay, so let's go back to what we said in the previous part about escalation.
Yes.
This felt like the escalation that that Zio
was building to.
Exactly. And other than the new cast, you could almost skip. You could almost go straight from Zio to space.
Pretty much, because there's very little plots in there, with the exception of the Millennium Message, but that's a whole different thing for another time.
Right. And so it felt like the show was building up again. It was building to something. So that was something exciting for viewers to look forward to each week.
Yeah, because it was always a new planet, a new situation, and you really didn't know what was going to come, because as much as Zio was good and Turbo was bad, there was still a formula that they were following. But Power Rangers in Space, I mean, they still had to fight the foot soldiers, fight the giant monster and the robots.
But there was a lot of other things happening.
They put so many different elements in there. I mean, it seriously was Star Trek meets Power Rangers, and I mean Star Trek in like Captain Kirk, use your fists first before diplomacy, or cowboy diplomacy from Reunification.
Yes. So, and also I know in the last one we mentioned that the new elements felt strange.
Yeah, because again, you're getting bigger, then you get small, and suddenly ramped right back up.
But a lot of the new elements that people complained about in Turbo, it felt, part of the thing about the new elements is that it was all these new things, but it was being pigeonholed into the old formula.
Yeah, because they got rid of Zora and Alpha. For what reason? I don't know. I've never heard an explanation for it. And so they give us a replacement, Alpha 6, who nobody liked because of his jive talk.
Who filled the exact same character role.
Same role. The personality was different, but not in a good way.
But story-wise, he did the same thing.
And then Demetria, oh my goodness, only asking questions. I'm glad she got out. I mean, it's lazy writing that they stopped doing that, but I'm so glad for lazy writing at that point.
Right, but she did the same stuff Zordon would do.
Exactly, so it makes you wonder.
She would say, hey guys, shit's going on, or is something happening?
Yeah, and I've had so many ideas of what you could have done with that, but we're not here to talk about rewriting the series. It's just that what they were doing, and this is much like what Megaforce is doing now, is that they're taking familiar elements, but transplanting them with something that's the exact same thing, just in a different package. So instead of Zordon, you got Demetria. Instead of Alpha 5, you get Alpha 6.
And it feels like a watered-down ripoff at that point.
And that would explain the Turbo changes. But what would you say? I mean, because Space got so far away from what Power Rangers originally was, but we all liked it. There was no mentor. There was nobody telling them what to do, and they had to do all this on their own, which was great.
All right, so it's not so much that things had changed when you went into space, that things had evolved.
Good point.
Things weren't being replaced. You weren't shuffling out a lot of the old characters. Yeah, you shuffled out Justin, but no one was missing him.
I'm going to go on your train of evolution real quick, because I would say the first 4 seasons were like a Squirtle, Turbo was like a Wartortle, and then Space became Blastoise.
I would say that Zio was the Wartortle, and then and then Turbo was one of those knockoffs of Pokemon toys that you get at the flea market.
Well, what I'm talking about is it's the middle one. You don't really like it. You like the original pre-evolution, and you like the 3rd stage. Nobody really likes the 2nd stage.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Well, I mean, we need to go ahead and close this up.
No,
are we still good on? Okay, good.
I've been keeping the eye on the timer. Don't worry.
Yeah, I hate this 15-minute limit. I'm sorry, folks. But ultimately, what one element do you think we can point to Power Rangers in Space's credit?
Progression.
progression. That's what saved the series.
Yes, it's that all the stuff that had been building to was delivered. And it was progressing in creativity. It was progressing in storytelling. It was progressing in just... Lost my train of thought. But
I know what you mean. I mean, it seems like it was getting better every week. And, of course, it ended with the greatest finale in any Power Rangers season that we've had.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can't think of a better finale.
So, yeah, to sum it up, why the changes of Space worked better than the changes of Turbo. Turbo replaced Space Evolved.
And ultimately, looking at the 6 years of Power Rangers in those first 6 years, what can you ultimately say? I mean, what would your overall thoughts be of how everything basically changed, and from where we started in Data Dumpster to where we ended in Countdown to Destruction? Was it all for the best, or did we lose something in there for sake of keeping the identity or changing things so we had to get rid of actors or any of those elements?
Well, I think there was a lot of potential lost in the insistence on keeping the Zeo suits for 3 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if the suits would have changed maybe midway through season 2, that could have been easier
or
to
even
accept.
season 3, I would have accepted that more.
Yes. So I think something was lost there. I think you gained a little by the suit and Zord changes into Zeo. It was something new. It evolved. The audience was growing older, and so the show changed.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I'm thinking it was acting more mature or anything, but
there were better stories as it went along.
Yes,
because Power Rangers really had a hard time finding a foothold of what it wanted to be when it first started.
Yes,
and it found its way towards the end of season 1, but by the time it did that, by the time it really had a standard status quo, it started changing rapidly, and I think to its disadvantage in a lot of places. I mean, the Zords, those were fine. I had no problems with those. Introduction of new characters like Ninjor, new villains like Lord Zed, those all worked to the benefit. But when you start getting rid of the elements that people liked, then that's when we started running into a problem.
Yes. So, and then when you entered the lower quality stuff of the Turbo era, that's when the repetitiveness of the show would wear on people.
Absolutely, because I will say Turbo was very repetitive. I mean, there were some good arcs in there. I'm not saying Turbo's completely horrible. It had some good ideas, but just couldn't capitalize on any of them.
And Space was still using, as you said, Space was still using fight the foot soldiers. More fight a monster, then call out the mechs when the monster gets enlarged.
Yeah.
But it was throwing out new ideas to break the monotony. Turbo just reminded you of the monotony. And I would say parts of season 3 reminded you of the monotony. It broke the... When you're throwing new ideas at people, you keep them within the, to use a film term here, the mise-en-scène.
Mm-hmm.
You're keeping them engrossed in the world. If you're not throwing new ideas at them, the viewers become aware of the flaws. You were saying about Star Trek First Contact before we recorded earlier.
Yeah.
You said there are several problems with it, but that the whole was just so good that you overlooked them.
Yeah, I mean, that's true of any story. I mean, look at Citizen Kane, the biggest plot hole in film history, and yet everybody loves that movie because the rest of it overshadowed its one plot hole.
Yes, and that's what Space was doing that Turbo failed at.
Yes, and I will agree with that because there were some plot holes in Space, but they were not as egregious, and Cassie kept coming back for more, or at least in my mind.
I know.
Well, Raptor, are we out of time?
We still have some, but I don't know.
I think we keep getting off topic, and I hate being constricted like this. But again, we probably ramble on until whenever. Who knows? But guys, I think we're pretty good. I think we went over enough things. But you know what? If we missed anything, if there's anything else you'd like us to go ahead and talk about or mention,
or if you have a different interpretation of the decline,
yeah, just let us know in the comments section. And, Raptor, any parting thoughts today?
My only parting thought is, man, I actually would have liked to see Justin in the Super Mega Force.
I would have liked to see him in RPM redeeming himself as a Red Ranger.
Yeah, I would have liked to see him show up in Super Mega Force, all grown up and shit.
Become a real badass. That's the main wish of everybody. But that's something of a different time. So I want to thank you guys for listening tonight to these various videos that we have. We'll keep them up as soon as finals week is over. But you guys have a good day, and the tavern is now closed.